Yella Beezy confronted Trapboy Freddy for snitching. Two men who recorded a project called I'm My Brother's Keeper, who swore loyalty to each other publicly for years, who came up together out of Oak Cliff before either of them had a deal or a platform, are now at the center of the most explosive betrayal story in Dallas rap history. Yella is fighting a capital murder charge in the Mo 3 case, staring down the possibility of life in prison or the death penalty. And when word got back to him that Trapboy Freddy may have helped investigators build that case, the confrontation was unavoidable. This is not a rap beat. This is not a diss track. This is two men from the same block with the same history, now on opposite sides of one of the most serious criminal cases this city has ever seen. And everything these two built together is now on the line. Yo, what's good, fam? We are about to go deep into one of the most layered stories in Dallas hip-hop history. We're breaking down the full history between Yella Beezy and Trapboy Freddy, how these two men went from Oak Cliff brothers to the center of a snitching controversy. We're getting into the Mo 3 murder case and what prosecutors are building inside that courtroom. We're talking about the accusations against Freddy, what the lead detective actually said under oath, and how the internet turned a complicated legal situation into a full betrayal narrative. And we're covering the latest from the July 2026 pretrial hearings and what's coming when that August trial date arrives. Because fam, what's actually happening is way more complex than the headlines. Let's get into it. To understand why any of this matters, you have to understand who these two men are and how far back they actually go. Marquise Conway, the world knows him as Yella Beezy, grew up in Oak Cliff, the southwest Dallas neighborhood that produced some of the toughest, most authentic music to ever come out of Texas. Oak Cliff isn't the kind of place that manufactures fake stories. It's the kind of place that creates artists who rap about what they actually lived. And Yella Beezy embodied that from his earliest releases. He started dropping mixtapes in the early 2010s, grinding through a series of projects that barely made a ripple outside Dallas. But the city knew who he was. The streets knew, and he kept working. Then came 2017 and a record called That's On Me. That song did what Dallas rap almost never managed to do. It crossed over, it broke out, it went from the city to the clubs to the charts, and by 2018, Yella Beezy had a major label situation with Hitsco and 300 Entertainment, a debut album that cracked the top half of the Billboard 200, and a public profile that had him opening shows for Jay-Z and Beyonce. By the end of the decade, streams across his catalog had surpassed 1 billion. A billion plays from a kid out of Oak Cliff who had been quietly putting in work for years before anybody outside Texas paid attention. That's the story of Yella Beezy. Now Trapboy Freddy, born to various Dontes Moore, was that same Oak Cliff energy in a different package. He started rapping as a teenager, recorded his very first mixtape in 30 days after purchasing a $1,400 home studio kit. That kind of hunger, that kind of willingness to just go is what Oak Cliff produces. Freddy built his name through a series of self-released projects, raw and unpolished in the best possible way, featuring that southern drawl over hard-knocking trap beats. His 2019 record, Lil Quita, built around a sample from a viral clip, became one of the most recognizable songs to come out of North Texas that year. Outside of music, Freddy stayed entrepreneurial. Dog kennels, tobacco shops, car auctions. The man was always building. What made their friendship feel real, what made it feel different from the standard rap feature relationship, was that it predated their success. These were two kids from the same neighborhood, running in the same circles, watching each other grind before either of them had a record deal or a manager or a platform. The friendship came first, the music came after. And that mattered because when they finally put a full project together, it felt like something more than a business decision. In May 2020, Yella Beezy and Trapboy Freddy dropped a collaborative mixtape called I'm My Brother's Keeper. 13 tracks, Texas trap at its finest, alternating between bass-boosted club records and hard street anthems and come-up stories that felt pulled directly from their lived experience. The project opened with a record called Racks, a pure dirty South Riders anthem where both men traded bars about where they came from and where they were headed. The video contrasted their early lives in Oak Cliff with the life they had built for themselves. But the message was clear. No matter how far the money took them, the foundation never changed. When they spoke about that mixtape at the time, Yella Beezy said, "You're standing 10 toes with your brother. You ride for him. You go to war for him." Trapboy Freddy described it as a moment for the city, a moment for Texas, a moment for the place that raised them both. These weren't throwaway press quotes. These were two men speaking publicly about a bond that went back years before any camera or microphone was ever pointed at them. And when people saw that project titled I'm My Brother's Keeper, they believed it. That's what makes the current situation hit the way it does. Now let me break down for y'all exactly how the snitching rumors started and why they spread the way they did. Before we get into the snitching allegations, let's talk about Mo 3 for a second, because he deserves that. Melvin Noble grew up in South Dallas, signed to Boosie Badazz's label, and was building one of the most loyal followings in Texas rap. His 2018 hit Everybody made it out of Dallas and onto national playlists. His run as an artist was genuinely promising. Then, on November 11th, 2020, he was driving on Interstate 35E in Dallas when a masked gunman cut him off. Mo 3 got out of his car and ran on foot through live highway traffic. The gunman chased him. Mo 3 was shot multiple times in the back of the head. He was taken to a hospital and died from his wounds.
A Dallas rapper was murdered outside of his car on I-35 near the Dallas Zoo. Hello, I'm Steve Eager.
I'm Heather Hayes. It is a stark example of the city's struggle to control violent crime. Police say the victim, a hip-hop musician named Mo 3, was approached by the killer on I-35. Both men stopped their vehicles. The victim got out, took off, started running, but was shot several times on the highway. A bystander inside another vehicle was also hit.
A bystander was also struck in the chaos. Traffic cameras captured the entire sequence. The footage hit the internet within hours and has been viewed tens of millions of times. For Dallas, it was a wound that never fully healed. For years, law enforcement worked the case without a high-profile arrest. That changed in March 2025, when Yella Beezy was taken into custody after a Dallas County grand jury handed down an indictment charging him with capital murder while remuneration, the legal language for murder for hire. Prosecutors alleged that Beezy paid a gunman named Keywan Dontrell White to carry out the killing. A second man, Devin Maurice Brown, was indicted on related charges. White had already been sentenced to approximately 9 years in federal prison on a separate gun charge in 2022. But the state maintained that the Mo 3 case represented a different level of criminal accountability entirely. Now before the arrest, the feud between Yella Beezy and Mo 3 had already been one of the worst kept secrets in Dallas. The two men had moved in overlapping circles for years. They had mutual associates. They worked some of the same venues and moved through some of the same social spaces. But somewhere along the way, things turned ugly. There were shootings, social media exchanges, songs that seemed to reference each other directly, and a rising tension that people close to both camps knew was serious. In 2018, Yella Beezy himself was shot multiple times while inside a vehicle on the Sam Rayburn Tollway in Louisville.
Tense moments very early this morning on a North Texas highway. Louisville police now looking for the person who fired more than a dozen shots at about 3:30 this morning on the Sam Rayburn Tollway. 3 of those bullets hit 26-year-old DeAndre Conway near Parker Road. We're told he was conscious and breathing, though, when police got to him.
He survived. The shooting was never publicly resolved in a courtroom, but the climate of violence around both men was something Dallas had been watching for years before Mo 3 was killed on that highway. The moment Yella Beezy was arrested, people immediately started asking the same question. How did investigators connect him to this? Who talked? And within days of the arrest, social media pages and YouTube channels with massive followings started pointing fingers directly at Trapboy Freddy. The theory went like this. Freddy had some knowledge, some connection, some proximity to the events surrounding Mo 3's death, and at some point, investigators came to him and Freddy gave something up. That theory spread because on the surface it seemed to fit. Freddy and Beezy were inseparable. If anyone knew anything, it would be someone that close. And the internet did what the internet does. It took a theory, stripped out the uncertainty, and packaged it as fact. Then came a statement from Trapboy Freddy himself that threw fuel onto the fire. In April 2025, through content that circulated across platforms including No Jumpers channels, Freddy publicly said that Yella Beezy had sold everything to pay for his bond and his lawyer fees. That statement exploded. People interpreted it as Freddy distancing himself, acknowledging the situation publicly, perhaps subtly signaling that Beezy was on his own. The image of Beezy liquidating assets to fight a capital murder charge while his supposed closest friend was out here speaking on it publicly was jarring to a lot of people who had followed both artists for years. And here's where it gets real complicated, fam. None of that added up to actual evidence that Trapboy Freddy cooperated with investigators. What it added up to was internet math. Online commentators took Freddy's public statement about finances, combined it with speculation about who might have talked, layered it on top of Freddy's prior federal gun charge and his 16-month federal prison sentence from 2023, and concluded that at some point between his arrest and his release, he must have given something up. That narrative became the dominant story on Dallas hip-hop social media and beyond for weeks. But here's where it gets real, because the courtroom eventually started speaking for itself. As pretrial hearings progressed through 2025 and into 2026, lead detective Eric Barnes was questioned by defense attorney Toby Shook during proceedings. Barnes testified that investigators did not currently have probable cause to arrest Trapboy Freddy. Read that again. The lead detective on the Mo3 murder case testified under questioning that law enforcement did not have probable cause to arrest a man the entire internet had already convicted of snitching. That testimony didn't make nearly as many headlines as the original rumors. That's how this works. The accusation gets the million views. The correction gets buried. Now, that doesn't mean Freddy's name was absent from the proceedings. The prosecution's theory in this case is built around context. Prosecutor Rick Vela and the state's legal team have argued throughout pretrial hearings that to understand why Mo3 was killed, a jury needs to understand the entire landscape of relationships, conflicts, musical collaborations, and public statements that surrounded the feud between Mo3 and Yella Beezy in the years before the shooting. That's where the prosecution attempted to introduce evidence involving people in Beezy's orbit, including materials that touched on Trapboy Freddy. Not because Freddy was cooperating, not because Freddy had flipped, but because the state wanted to use music, interviews, and shared collaborations as contextual material to help establish its broader conspiracy narrative. There is a significant difference between a prosecutor referencing someone as part of a contextual argument and that same person cooperating as a witness. But in the environment of social media, in the speed with which clips and screenshots and partial transcripts circulate, that distinction collapsed almost immediately. What circulated online was the headline. The details got lost. The prosecution's evidentiary strategy in this case is aggressive and ambitious. Investigators pointed to multiple Yella Beezy songs, including Hittas, Keep It in the Streets, and On Your Head, arguing in pretrial hearings that lyrics from those records reference paying for violence and placing a bounty on a rival. Prosecutors contend those themes align directly with their murder for hire theory, and that the music should be understood not as artistic expression, but as a window into Beezy's actual mindset and intentions in the period surrounding Mo3's death. The state has also sought to introduce social media posts, interview footage, and evidence from a series of earlier shootings to demonstrate how the feud between the two artists escalated over time. Authorities noted the case rests on far more than lyrics alone, including witness statements, physical evidence, intercepted communications, phone records, and surveillance data placing suspects near the scene before the shooting. Conway himself withdrew $40,000 in cash within days of Mo3's killing, according to the original arrest documentation. But here's where it gets interesting, fam, because the defense is fighting back hard on all of it. Toby Shook, Yella Beezy's defense attorney, has pushed back against virtually every element of the prosecution's evidentiary strategy. Shook's position is that prosecutors are attempting to criminalize artistic expression, to take the standard language and bravado of hip-hop music and transform it into literal evidence of criminal planning. The defense called an expert witness during the July 17, 2026 pretrial hearing, Dr. Eric Nielsen, a professor at the University of Richmond who has spent years studying the legal implications of rap lyrics in criminal proceedings. Nielsen's testimony was direct and pointed. He explained that rappers construct fictional personas, that they exaggerate, that the tradition of hip-hop has always involved storytelling that blurs the line between lived experience and artistic performance. He cited research showing that people interpret the exact same lyrical content significantly more literally when it's labeled as rap than when it's labeled as country music. He warned the court that allowing lyrics to be interpreted as autobiographical confessions could send people to prison for things they did not do. Defense attorneys argued that the disputed evidence is irrelevant, unfairly prejudicial, and protected by the First Amendment. The judge presiding over the case had not yet issued a final ruling on the lyrics question as of the most recent hearing. That ruling is expected to play a defining role in how the trial unfolds when it begins on August 24, 2026. If the judge allows the lyrics in, prosecutors will have a powerful emotional tool to deploy in front of a jury that may not be deeply familiar with how hip-hop music actually works. If the judge keeps them out, the state will have to rely more heavily on its physical evidence, phone records, surveillance footage, and witness testimony to carry the full weight of the murder-for-hire narrative. Either way, the decision shapes the battlefield before a single juror hears an opening statement. Now let me give y'all the full picture of where this case stands inside that courtroom, because the hearing-by-hearing timeline of this thing tells its own story. When Yella Beezy was first indicted in March 2025, his bond was set at $2 million. That number alone told you how seriously the state was treating this. It was eventually reduced to $750,000 after a bond reduction hearing, and Beezy was released. The original trial date was set for February 2nd, 2026. Then in January of that year, Beezy's mother passed away. He did not appear at the scheduled January 16th pretrial hearing. His attorney confirmed the loss and the court reset the trial to August 24th, 2026. From there, the pretrial process intensified. A March 6 hearing addressed the defense's omnibus pretrial motion, where Toby Shook went directly at the state's plan to introduce Beezy's own songs as evidence. Judge Chika Anyam heard both sides and reviewed defense exhibits before indicating she would rule after further deliberation. The state also pushed to introduce evidence surrounding the Boosie Badazz shooting as part of what prosecutors described as the escalating pattern of violence behind the feud. The defense fought that too, arguing it was irrelevant and prejudicial. Then on July 17, 2026, both sides returned to court for what became one of the most closely watched hearings in the entire pretrial process. That was the day the rap lyrics question took center stage, with Dr. Nielsen's testimony laying out exactly why the defense believes allowing those songs into evidence could corrupt the entire trial. And on July 22nd, attorneys squared off again over social media posts, interview footage, and additional shooting evidence the prosecution wants in front of the jury. The judge has still not ruled on all of it. A final pretrial hearing is set for August 21st, just 3 days before the trial begins. Every one of those rulings is going to shape what that jury sees and hears. And if convicted, Yella Beezy faces life in prison without parole or the death penalty under Texas law. Let that sink in for a minute. Now let's talk about the confrontation, because this is the part the whole city has been locked in on. The streets have been saying that when word got back to Yella Beezy about Trapboy Freddy's name surfacing in the context of this investigation, Beezy didn't let it slide. That he went directly at Freddy. That he demanded answers from the man who once stood next to him and said they would go to war for each other. Think about what that moment would look like. Two men who built a career on loyalty, who titled their joint project after the most famous expression of brotherhood in the Bible, now sitting across from each other with the weight of a capital murder case between them. That is the confrontation the streets have been talking about. And the reason people believed it happened is because it would have been almost impossible for it not to. Here is what can be confirmed. In April 2025, Trapboy Freddy made public statements saying that Yella Beezy had sold everything to pay for his bond and his legal fees. That comment circulated across platforms including No Jumper's channels and exploded on social media. People immediately read it as Freddy putting distance between himself and the situation, signaling publicly that whatever Beezy was going through, he was going through it alone. The image of a man who once called Beezy his brother, now speaking openly about his legal bills, hit different to everyone who had followed their friendship for years. Some argued Freddy was speaking out of genuine concern, trying to show the community how serious the situation had become. Others saw it as something else entirely. Either way, the statement landed like a grenade. When the snitching allegations reached a fever pitch, Freddy pushed back publicly, denying that he had cooperated with law enforcement against Yella Beezy and challenging the narrative being built around him online. But by that point, the accusation had already lapped the denial by miles. That is the reality of the social media era. The accusation gets the millions of views. The denial gets the comment section. And the courtroom eventually offered the most important piece of context of all. When lead detective Eric Barnes testified that investigators did not have probable cause to arrest Trapboy Freddy, that testimony cut against the most extreme version of the snitching story. But it did not erase the public perception of a friendship that had visibly frayed under the pressure of the most serious legal situation either man had ever faced. Whether the confrontation between Yella Beezy and Trapboy Freddy happened exactly the way the streets described it, in person, face to face, or whether it played out in a phone call or a private exchange, nobody has put on record, has not been publicly verified. What is verified is that the distance between them is real, and the entire Dallas hip-hop community has been watching it grow in real time. The Dallas hip-hop community has been split right down the middle on all of it. The people who bought the I'm My Brother's Keeper project, who quoted Yella Beezy's words about going to war for your brother, are now watching that same friendship examined through a legal lens. Some have defended Freddy loudly, pointing to the detective's testimony about probable cause as proof that the snitching accusations have no foundation. Others believe the very fact that Freddy's name surfaced in courtroom discussions at all is proof enough that something shifted. Podcasters, YouTube creators, and Dallas media figures have produced hours of content dissecting every available detail. And the weight of a capital murder case, as anyone close to the situation will tell you, changes every relationship it touches. It changes what people say publicly and what they keep private. It changes who stays close and who slowly drifts. Because Yella Beezy and Trapboy Freddy are public figures with years of documented declarations about their brotherhood. Every one of those shifts gets amplified and examined by the entire internet. The broader legal question the case raises is one that extends far beyond Oak Cliff and far beyond Texas. The fight over whether rap lyrics can be used as evidence in criminal trials has been building across American courtrooms for years. Young Thug's case in Atlanta set a national precedent for how aggressive the prosecution's use of music can be in gang conspiracy cases. New Jersey and California have passed state laws placing limits on how rap lyrics can be introduced in criminal proceedings. The Yella Beezy case now puts that debate back in the spotlight at the federal level, with defense experts arguing that allowing lyrics to be interpreted literally could produce wrongful convictions, and with prosecutors insisting that when an artist recorded words directly match the alleged criminal conduct, those words are evidence. The judge's pending ruling on that question may shape how Dallas handles similar cases for years to come. Here's where it all lands right now. Yella Beezy's capital murder trial is scheduled to begin on August 24th, 2026. The final pre-trial hearing is set for August 21st. The judge has not yet issued a ruling on whether the rap lyrics can come in. Prosecutors have built a case around witness testimony, surveillance footage, phone records, the $40,000 cash withdrawal, and what they describe as substantial physical and digital evidence, with the lyrics as one additional piece of that mosaic. The defense has fought nearly every element of that strategy, arguing that the state is trying to use artistic expression to criminalize a man who has pleaded not guilty to every charge. Toby Shook has been methodical and aggressive at every hearing. The case is heading toward a Dallas courtroom in less than a month. And right in the middle of all of it is the friendship that once put out a project called I'm My Brother's Keeper. Real talk, whether that confrontation happened exactly the way people said it did online, the damage to the public image of Yella Beezy and Trapboy Freddy's relationship is already real. The words they said in 2020 about loyalty and standing 10 toes down with your brother are being heard differently now against the backdrop of a capital murder case, a detective's testimony, social media accusations, and a public statement about sold assets. The title of their joint project has become one of the most ironic data points in the entire story. The streets have been watching, the courtroom has been speaking, and when that trial starts on August 24th, a Dallas jury is going to hear evidence that could determine whether Yella Beezy spends the rest of his life in prison or walks out of that courtroom. Every relationship he's ever had, every record he ever made, every word he ever said on a microphone may end up meaning something in that room that none of them were intended to mean when they were first spoken. That's where this story is right now. And however the next pretrial hearing shapes the evidence, however the August 21st ruling lands on the lyrics question, and however the trial itself unfolds, the friendship between two brothers from Oak Cliff is going to be remembered as one of the defining subplots of one of the most consequential criminal cases Dallas hip-hop has ever produced. After everything that's come out, do you think these two ever get back to where they were? Drop your thoughts in the comments and check out the video on screen for more.